You'll never be happy, she said with a laugh, but her face lingers in my mind. That won't happen. I'm determined that Matthew, our unborn child, and I will be happy together. Thinking this, I desperately gave birth to our child. Sorry. I'm late. Seeing him rush in, 5 hours after I gave birth, somehow reassured me. Thanks for coming. Meet our daughter, I said, showing our child to Matthew, expecting him to be thrilled. But his reaction was far from what I expected. What? No. Matthew? Contrary to my expectations, Matthew started shaking violently. Why did this happen? What's wrong? Did something happen? Matthew muttered, bewildering me with his condition. Then, I noticed his gaze was not on me or our daughter. Matthew, what do you see? I asked, thinking his psychic abilities might be showing him something. He hesitated, then began, actually. His words would astonish me. I am Elise, a 26-year-old engineer and a working mom. I'm the youngest, born locally, and was always pampered. Though I was scolded when I did something bad, I believe I grew up as a normal woman. Elise was always smiling and was no trouble at all. My mother often said that. Apparently, I have always been smiling since I was young, managing my mood on my own. While my brothers were always bustling, I was easy to handle, a relief for everyone. I didn't think much of it until I started working. You're the new recruit, right? Would you like to talk for a bit? That's when I met Matthew, who would become my husband, and learned the truth. I know it's hard to believe, but I actually have psychic abilities. According to him, my ancestors have always been watching over me with a smile. That's why he approached me, thinking I must be a wonderful person loved by my ancestors. Honestly, I never believed in spirits. But his earnest expression didn't seem to lie. Maybe my ancestors were the ones keeping my mood up when I was young. Upon hearing the stories from my mother, he laughed, saying, "You have good ancestors." Our conversations brought us closer. If it's okay with you, Elise, would you like to go out with me? Soon after, he confessed, and we started dating. Though he sometimes looked scared at nothing, he said, "Being near you makes me feel safe because no evil can come near." According to Matthew, our ancestors who watch over me also protect us, keeping bad spirits at bay. Thanks to that, while he's with me, he enjoys peaceful times. I also feel happy when I'm with Matthew. Why don't we get married then? And so, we decided to marry. My parents liked him too, and we enjoyed a calm married life. We are happy now, but things were tough before we married. Dad's fine, but my sister Brenda is a handful. According to Matthew, his sister Brenda is quite the troublesome person. My father-in-law has always listened seriously to Matthew and has always been on his side. However, it seems she was different, being doted on by her mother. She always had to be number one, convinced her opinions were right. Ever since I was a kid, I didn't get along with such a sister, and I left home almost like I was running away. She doesn't believe in spirits at all and has always dismissed Matthew as a liar. As a result, he and his sister are at odds. My mother always spoiled her. His now-deceased mother doted on his sister. She spoiled her without ever scolding her. Raised by such a mother, his sister developed a selfish personality, and even her father is at a loss with her. Above all, my sister looks down on me. She might say something terrible to Elise. It's okay. I won't mind whatever she says. I told Matthew that, but I was a little worried. Until now, I hadn't had such people around me. Strictly speaking, there were people who spoke ill, but I kept my distance from them. However, since she's now family, I can't just run away. Honestly, my sister and I are estranged, so you don't have to try to get along forcibly. Sensing my feelings, Matthew kindly said that. Reassured by his words and smile, I nodded. Being with someone as kind as him, I thought everything would surely be all right. Then, on the day we went to greet his family for the marriage, I was nervous as we visited his parents' house. You seem like a kind young lady. I hope you two will have a happy marriage life. His father, a mild-mannered man, warmly welcomed me. at that moment, feeling relieved because he shared Matthew's gentle demeanor. What? Why is Matthew here? A woman appeared in front of us. As soon as he saw her face, Matthew's smiling expression turned to disgust. Why are you here? You weren't supposed to be here today. It's none of your business. Watching their exchange, I realized she must be the infamous sister. Weren't you going shopping? I realized I didn't have any cash on me. Dad, can I have some allowance? Despite being an adult, she was still asking her parents for money. While I was inwardly appalled, her gaze turned to me. Who's this? My fiancé. What? Matthew, you're getting married? She looked surprised, and I hurriedly introduced myself. After scrutinizing me, the sister said, kind of plain looking. Matthew really has poor taste, and burst out laughing. I was taken aback by such a reaction, freezing in place. She's truly rude. Elise, let's go home. Matthew, seeing I couldn't respond, pulled me by the arm. As we left his parents' house, his sister cackled, they ran away, and was scolded by their father. I'm really sorry about my sister. Once we got home, Matthew apologized profusely. Don't apologize so much. I was just a bit shocked. I reassured him, and he seemed relieved, though visibly exhausted. Matthew, what's wrong? Well, according to Matthew, his deceased mother had been behind his sister, constantly saying, my dear Brenda, and that useless son. Realizing this must have upset him, I suggested, it must have been tough. Why don't you rest today? Thank you, Elise. With that, Matthew headed to the bedroom, and I watched his tired figure retreat. It's terrible to favor one sibling over the other. When I first heard Matthew's story, I couldn't believe it. My parents loved me, the youngest, as much as they loved my siblings. I never felt any disparity. I couldn't imagine someone really behaving differently just because someone is a sister or a brother. But, I guess I just need to make up for his mother's lack of affection towards Matthew, right? I murmured to myself, deciding to love Matthew even more than before. After greeting each other's families, we've been busy preparing for our wedding. Still, I couldn't neglect my work. You. On my way to a meeting, I stopped when someone called out. It was her, that sister-in-law. I was stunned to realize she worked at the same company. Seeing me freeze, she smirked. So, you work here too? Nice to see you again. Though the meeting was about to start, I couldn't just walk away without greeting her. Just as I was about to leave after a brief exchange. What a waste of time. And to think, a client, no less. Her words made me inwardly exclaim in disbelief. It seemed she was the client we were about to meet. Good to know. I look forward to working with you. Yes, I look forward to it as well. I managed to respond and headed to the meeting room while listening to her boast about her significance. However, her demeanor would change drastically in the meeting. I'm looking forward to this, Elise. I've heard a lot about you. It's a pleasure to work together. Both my boss and my sister-in-law's boss offered words of expectation. Normally, I would respond with all my energy, but she's so unsophisticated. Her glaring made it hard for me to genuinely rejoice. Then, her boss sighed deeply. You should take a leaf out of her book too. Immediately after, the gaze directed at me sent chills down my spine. It was filled with unmistakable dislike and hostility. Confronted with such a look for the first time, I was rendered speechless. Is something the matter? No, it's nothing. I replied to the director, and turned my gaze back to my sister-in-law, who was no longer looking at me. Yet, the chill lingered. What? My sister at the company? I immediately consulted Matthew. He too was surprised to learn that his sister was involved with our client. His concerned expression made me worry. Are you okay? How are you feeling? I was feeling chills earlier, but I'm fine now. According to Matthew, it seems his mother's spirit, which follows his sister, had marked me as an enemy but was thwarted by my ancestors. Elise, we should talk to the boss. Honestly, I don't know what my sister might do. Nodding at his words, we consulted our boss about his sister. We carefully avoided mentioning what Matthew had seen, focusing instead on the fact that she was soon to become family by marriage and that Matthew was estranged from her. So that's the situation. Elise is indispensable for this project. I'll discuss it with the other side. In this deal, the app one developed is central. Thus, my participation is crucial. Meanwhile, it turned out that my sister-in-law had tagged along with her boss by force. She said, "I will make this a success," but her attitude honestly left much to be desired. So, the boss had already considered cutting her from the project. As a result, she was removed from this job, and our rift deepened. "I will never forgive you." Enraged by this development, she began to cause trouble for us. "Stop it, it's enough." Not only did my father-in-law scold her, but she was finally kicked out of her parents' home. Now needing to hastily find a place to live, she seemed too preoccupied to bother us further. "You'll never be happy in your marriage. And you'll never find happiness." However, she was not one to back down easily. These were her parting words, spoken with a laugh, just before she was driven out. That gave me an uneasy feeling. "Don't worry about her. I will make you happy." And so, we were married. Contrary to her words, we are living happily. Just recently, something wonderful happened. Congratulations. I found out I was pregnant. When I told Matthew, my parents, and my father-in-law, they were all thrilled. I was overjoyed, but pregnancy has its challenges. I struggled with severe morning sickness and even had a breech baby, but I was determined to see it through. Normally, Matthew would be there to support me, but I'm really sorry. Don't worry. You're working hard enough for both of us. As I stepped back, he was busier than ever covering for me. Because of that, I was in a situation where I couldn't really rely on him. Ideally, I would have turned to my parents' home, but being in the countryside meant it was hard to see them. Surely not. The words that flashed through my mind were those of my sister-in-law. Could it be that she had cursed me? No, that can't be. Although I understand the supernatural from Matthew's experiences, I certainly don't believe in curses. Even if there were a curse, I would never let it defeat me. I murmured this as a vow while gently stroking my belly. Thanks to that declaration, our child continued to grow healthily. And finally, the day arrived. "Elise, you can do this." The birth was incredibly difficult. My baby just wouldn't come out, no matter how many hours passed. I managed to grit my teeth and hold on to consciousness, which seemed ready to slip away. "You'll never be happy," she had said with a laugh, and her face flashed through my mind. That won't happen. I'm determined that Matthew, our unborn child, and I will be happy together. With that thought, I pushed through the labor. Sorry. I'm late. 5 hours after giving birth. Seeing him rush in, I felt a strange sense of relief. "Thanks for coming. Meet our daughter," I said, showing our child to Matthew, expecting him to be thrilled. But his reaction was far from what I anticipated. "What? No!" "Matthew?" Contrary to my expectations, Matthew started shaking violently. "Why has this happened? What's wrong? Did something happen?" Matthew muttered. I was only able to be bewildered by his state. At that moment, I realized his gaze was not on me or our daughter. "Matthew, what do you see?" I asked, suspecting his psychic abilities might be showing him something. When I questioned him, he hesitated, then began, "Actually." The words he released shocked me. "Actually, my mother was just here." Apparently, our newly born daughter was being targeted by my mother-in-law's spirit. She had said, "I don't need a child that will torment my dear Brenda." Matthew tried to stop her, but he lacks the ability to exorcise spirits. So, all he could do was tremble helplessly. At that moment, my father appeared. I gasped in surprise at his words. His reference to a father could only mean my father-in-law. However, my father-in-law was still alive. So, it's impossible for my father to have been there. My father-in-law then disappeared along with my mother-in-law. Matthew muttered, "Why did this happen? We may not know the truth, but let's celebrate the birth of our daughter anyway." Saying that, Matthew gazed at our daughter with a face filled with love. Seeing him genuinely rejoice in her birth, I smiled too. Then, the next day. "Matthew? What's wrong?" His face was pale when he visited the hospital room. His demeanor was so different from yesterday that I quickly asked what was wrong. "My dad was in a car accident yesterday." "What?" Our kind father-in-law? The one who was looking forward to holding his granddaughter. In a car accident? "How is he?" I asked, and he shook his head. "He didn't make it." At those words, my mind went blank. According to Matthew, our father-in-law had been a hit-and-run victim, and by the time a passerby noticed him, he had already passed away. And this had happened just before I gave birth, while I was struggling through labor. So, it really was my dad who helped us at that time. It might have been that kind and caring father-in-law of ours. He must have been watching over me, appearing when my mother-in-law tried to harm our daughter. My father-in-law protected us. At my words, Matthew nodded with a tearful look. The ordeal was probably harder on him than I imagined. My dad protected us. Now, it's my turn to protect both of you. With that, Matthew embraced me and our daughter. His expression seemed resolved, his gaze fixed above me. Perhaps he was seeing something I couldn't. "Matthew? Your ancestors are teaching me a lot. It's time to settle things with my sister once and for all." Why bring up his sister now? I would learn the reasons several months later. From then on, we faced no major problems, and I safely returned home. "Welcome back, Elizabeth." Matthew greeted us warmly. Elizabeth is our daughter's name. It combines the sounds of Matthew's and my name. Our precious, beloved daughter. If any force meant to harm her, we would confront it head-on. While watching Elizabeth sleep peacefully, I resolved. "Shall we go?" "Yes, let's go." We left Elizabeth with my parents for a little while and visited a particular place. "Huh? Why are you guys here?" We had arrived at the company where his sister worked. We had already received permission from our clients and decided to use a conference room for the discussion. "What do you want?" "Our child was born recently." Already displeased at seeing us, my sister-in-law's expression twisted even more. "A failure. So what? Were you trying to harm our daughter to get back at us?" At Matthew's cold words, my sister-in-law shuddered, probably because he had hit the mark. She has always been prideful, never satisfied unless she's the best. Her pride wounded by me, she schemed to hurt Elizabeth, my precious thing. "You mistakenly thought she had wronged you and tried to take Elizabeth away from Elise. But, Dad stopped you." Even after driving out my sister-in-law, my father-in-law had kept an eye on her, suspecting she might do something. He realized she was planning something harmful to me or Elizabeth and intervened. "You thought of Dad as a nuisance, didn't you? Maybe you thought you'd get an inheritance by hitting him." At that, my sister-in-law's body jerked. On the day of the accident, my father-in-law, having noticed something was off, confronted her outside the company. He told her, "Stop meddling with my son and his wife. Stop your foolishness." Enraged, she hit him with her car on his way home. "You know I have psychic abilities, right? Dad told me a lot." After hearing from my father-in-law, Matthew thought he couldn't expose my sister-in-law's crime without further proof. While I was hospitalized, he did some digging. It was hard to find evidence, but I managed to get it on a dash cam. "What's on it?" "My walking dad and your car speeding towards him." Despite the police missing it, Matthew's persistence uncovered it. He then confronted my sister-in-law with a copy of the evidence. Seeing it, Brenda looked away and muttered, "Ugh, this is the worst. Why do you and Dad always have to interfere?" And she turned an annoyed face towards us. "It's always been like this. Mom always listened to me, but you two keep interfering. We have to interfere, obviously. Matching his sister's glare, Matthew began to share his long-held feelings. You've always acted like the world revolves around you, just like Mom said it did, doing whatever you wanted since you were little. As a child, taking toys from others was the norm for her. During her school days, she was always causing trouble by messing with other people's boyfriends. It was always my father-in-law who cleaned up after her. Because of you, I was always known as the spoiled woman's brother. And despite only sharing about my psychic abilities within the family, you spread that I was a liar. You've been a nuisance since forever. The interference was always from your side. But, unlike you, I only had Mom as my ally. You brought it upon yourself. Nobody wants to be close to someone so selfish, especially someone who causes them trouble. Even then, Dad was trying to take responsibility for his daughter to the end. Now he's gone. It's time for you to take responsibility for yourself. Matthew declared, staring down his sister. Though intimidated, she glared back at him. What now, what? If only Dad hadn't meddled. He was only doing what a father should. By the way, where were you during Dad's funeral? Fayel's funeral had taken place while I was hospitalized. I had managed to send my regards later, but she hadn't shown her face at all. It's none of your business. That's right. You're no longer our concern. At those words, my sister-in-law looked taken aback. You are no longer my sister. Ignoring his sister, Matthew declared this. Afterwards, his sister was arrested for her involvement in their father's case. She might also face charges for resisting arrest. Let's completely sever ties with her now. Following Matthew's words, we decided to cut ties with her, who we now refer to merely as Brenda. Are you sure about this? She's your only family, isn't she? My family is my father, Elise, and Elizabeth. Matthew said with a smile. Indeed, Matthew is not alone. However, I had another concern. She won't try to harm me or Elizabeth again, will she? It's okay. In the end, she can't do anything by herself. Until now, his parents had protected her in their own ways. His mother had taken meticulous care of her, ensuring everything would be okay, even in her absence. His father, though angry at her actions, couldn't bring himself to abandon her and continued to take care of her. Losing her parents meant she was overwhelmed just trying to live on her own. So, we'll be fine if we just keep our distance physically. Brenda was fired from her job after this incident. Apparently, she had a bad reputation at her company already. An investigation revealed she was stealing credit from coworkers and had insulting words and behavior. As a result, she was fired without anyone to defend her. Then, we decided to move. The app one developed was a huge success, and a new branch was being established. I was appointed as the branch manager, and Matthew would join me as my assistant after my maternity leave. And to think, it's near my hometown. This way, I could easily rely on my parents. I'm looking forward to raising Elizabeth together with everyone. I'm looking forward to it too. Matthew looked relieved, perhaps feeling a change in his spirits now that he was free from Brenda. By the way, what were my ancestors doing? They were there to protect Elise, and Dad was there too. It seems his father could handle even his own wife. Thanks to that, Elizabeth was safely born. Well, it might be why Brenda ended up taking matters into her own hands with his father. I can't thank my father-in-law enough. Recently, his will was discovered. Perhaps he sensed something. In his will, he stipulated that Brenda would not inherit anything. He wanted his estate to be used for Elizabeth's future. Now, it's our turn to protect Elizabeth. Yeah, that's right. Surely, his father is watching over our daughter's growth. To reassure him, we made a promise to firmly protect her. Afterwards, it seems Brenda was given a prison sentence. She was reported in the news as the horrible daughter who committed a hit and run on her own father. With this, she has no place left to go. Even after her release, she's well known everywhere, so she really has nowhere to go. Besides, her family home is on the market. Everyone around us has pledged not to tell her where we've moved, so I can focus on raising our child with peace of mind. While I was watching the news, I heard Elizabeth's cry. Hearing that, I went to her with a smile. "Elise, did you see the news?" "Yes, I saw it." When Matthew got home, he talked to me while holding Elizabeth. "A letter came to the company from her." "Oh, really?"
Yeah.
"They sent it over thinking I should know." The letter apparently said, "I am reflecting. I need help." Incidentally, after reading it, he tore it up and threw it away. After all the trouble she's caused and people she's hurt, it's ridiculous to think she'd get help. I nodded at his words. Years later, Elizabeth is growing up well, and both Matthew and I manage our workdays, soothed by her presence. "Mama, listen." "What is it, Elizabeth?" "Grandpa says thank you." Elizabeth's words made me tilt my head. She calls my father Grandpa, but it sounded a bit off, and why would he ask her to pass on a message? "Elizabeth, where is this Grandpa?" When I asked, she pointed to an empty spot and exclaimed, "There." It reminded me of something my mother and Matthew once told me. "Elizabeth, you're just like me." Apparently, just as my ancestors had once appeased me, Elizabeth was being watched over by her grandfather. I owe him more thanks than I can ever express. "Mama? Let's have some snacks, shall we?" At my words, Elizabeth responded with a smile. That soothed me again. It seems Dad is still watching over us. I immediately told Matthew when he got home, and he murmured thoughtfully, "We should all go visit him soon." At his words, I nodded with a smile. Elizabeth also chimed in cheerfully, "Yes." Then, on a long weekend a few days later, we visited the land where the family home once stood. Suddenly, Matthew's gaze was drawn in a certain direction. Following his gaze, there was a disheveled woman staggering along. Recognizing the familiar figure, I thought it might be Brenda. "Could that be Brenda?" "Probably," Matthew responded, looking away. He seemed to lose interest quickly. He lifted Elizabeth with a smile and continued on. I gave one last look at the woman, then followed after Matthew. After speaking with a former colleague, it turned out that it really was Brenda. She's juggling several part-time jobs, just trying to make it day by day. She must be struggling considerably. Remembering her looking older than her actual age, I felt a pang of sympathy. Matthew might say she deserves no sympathy. Curse others and you dig two graves. Maybe now, she's getting her just desserts. It seems her misfortune will continue. That's her retribution. Later, I learned from a former colleague that she had been arrested for theft. I should forget about her too. Forget about Brenda and focus on my family's happiness. Surely, that's what my father-in-law would want. Well, I need to get back to work. As the branch manager, there are plenty of things I need to handle. Even though Matthew helps as my assistant, I need to do my part. Besides, I want to create a new app. The app I'm envisioning is a game that even small children can play. As Elizabeth grows, we might have less time together. But if she plays with the app one created, it feels like we're still connected. That sounds great. Let me help too. It's a gift for Elizabeth after all, he said with a smile, seemingly having moved past everything. Inspired by his resilience, I resolved to work hard as well. Eventually, our app became a global hit. I love this game, Elizabeth told us with a beaming smile, and we were thrilled. Recognized for our success, we advanced further in our careers. Maybe it's because we cut ties. Everything's going well. It's the result of our efforts. Indeed. We started our journey to happiness together. Years later, as a busy branch manager. Mom, Grandpa says don't push yourself too hard. Sorry. Elizabeth still seems to see her grandfather, much like Matthew might. But he doesn't appear in front of me. The only time Matthew saw his father was the day Elizabeth was born. Maybe Grandpa is just shy. Possibly. After his mother passed away, Matthew was quite frightened by her apparition as a spirit. Knowing this, maybe he chooses not to appear in front of him. I wish I could meet Phil too. As I murmured this, a breeze passed between us, as if to say he's here even if we can't see him. Mom, Dad, hurry up. Coming. Elizabeth called us with a full smile, and we responded in kind. Elizabeth is quite the little rascal. I'm indulging with Mom and Dad for now. I'm going to be a big sister soon. At that, we exchanged glances. When we later visited the hospital, we discovered I was pregnant with our second child. We promised to seek happiness together with this new life as well.